Okay. So this meeting is being recorded. This is the Finance Committee meeting. Today is Tuesday, January 2nd. We're on the second floor, room 21 of the in the Finance Committee meeting room. Roll call. Everyone is present. We do have one vacancy. We have two outstanding meeting minutes, and our recording secretary is out, so we will not be reviewing meeting minutes. So I'm going to forego the rest of the agenda, just because I'd like to see if we can get to the old business. The first item is follow-up on joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen document review. So as you recall, there were some questions after we got out of our joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, and thank you to the financial team that all came tonight. So if anybody has specific questions on anything that was distributed at the joint meeting, specifically the fiscal 25 preliminary revenue and expenditure forecast that looks like this, was one of the documents that was distributed at the meeting. And again, I'd just like to recognize everybody that came tonight to answer questions, and if we can get it done before Tom Hickey, welcome. Tom's meeting is at 7:15, so if we can't get it done before 7:15, I would ask that if you can stay, and we'll get it done after the two budget meetings. That would be great. So I'll open it up to, and Sean Kane, Selectman Kane did send some attachments to an email to give you some perspective on. And Sean, I'll let you introduce it. I guess the information that you sent.
Yeah, sure. Well, there was a mention of some backup at the meeting that we had, and really, I think one of the things that we just want to get better and better at is some of the financial planning that we've been doing. And we don't want that to happen in a vacuum. We want that to be an open process. So we went over some of the presentation, obviously, when you guys were with us, but for you to see, basically, I just went on the Division of Local Services and downloaded. If you haven't been on that site, it's super easy, like user-friendly. You can see basically just the stuff that has been submitted over the last couple of years, so you can kind of see trends. Over the last 5 years, I think they've done a good job with that site specifically, so you can get better at looking at trends within your own local municipality. So I wanted just to share that site with you, basically, because I go on there fairly often just to see some of the official numbers that we're in. These guys have the numbers, obviously, at their fingertips because that's what they do, but we can look at them, the everyday people can look at them if they're looking in the right places. So I wanted you to see that as some of the trends that we look at as we're doing our revenue forecast. I actually brought. You mentioned it in the meeting, but I'm not sure if everybody here has seen it, the timeline.
Dan, there's a chair right there, right in the corner.
We can move down one more. Yeah.
You want me to distribute these?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so everybody at this table is definitely familiar with the DLS website because I do forward information from them on a pretty regular basis. Excellent source of information, I think, for everyone, whether you're just the casual finance committee member or your job is municipal finance. I think they offer a wealth of knowledge for everyone. So
yeah, and this is a best practice model that the Division of Local Service also puts out for a timeline for the budget cycle. And you read from the timeline actually at the meeting.
Right.
It's something that I've referred to in the past and something I've shared with the financial team here, and I think it's what we should be moving closer to. So this is the first year that we've officially adopted this timeline. And you can see the highlighted part there that says the most effective budget process follows a formal calendar that begins in the fall each year with the revenue and expenditure projections, also known as a financial forecast. So that's kind of like what we were trying to do. This is our first year, so we're going to get better every year that we do it, especially with your feedback. Little things that you want to hear more about, or certain trends that we didn't cover that you would like us to cover. I think the communication between both boards is essential for us to get better at the financial forecasting. The revenue stuff, we went over some of the local receipts in the meeting, and I think some of that information from the Division of Local Services is helpful to look back at how local receipts has kind of a little bit of trends with that. The financial policy that we have in place, if you don't review the financial policy, I think that might be helpful periodically just to look at some of the stuff that we try to look at that was adopted by the board a couple of years ago, having to do with revenue projections and debt and that kind of stuff. So.
Excellent. All right, so anybody else, just general statements? Do we have specific questions, Rosemary?
Well, general statements. Of course, I'm big on the DLS, and it does reflect directly to our Finance Committee handbook, which we should be using, which we pull from, and that was one of the resources is in the back. And when we review this and review it here, I want to just make comments on two different things. As we've started this particular budget season off, we haven't followed best practices. Because in best practices, we're supposed to take our largest budget and build around it. We've done that in reverse. So, and I know part of that is because the school hasn't come in yet. It was supposed to start with education and then build around education. It seems like we've done that backwards. Additionally, in our policies, it's a growth percentage going forward. And when we took the money from the schools and didn't put it into free cash, we didn't have a total sense of total amounts of revenue to then divvy up equally between all those departments. We have growth that's already occurred within budgets that and the other budgets that did not receive money are gonna be growing at a different rate. So that's already thrown off. And I think I said something about that. So I really appreciate this, but I don't want to selectively utilize it. And that's what I feel like. Additionally, when we looked at the numbers that you had, Sean, something that, again, one of the trends that I've been concerned with and I've talked about quite a bit was state aid. Percentage of state aid per budget has gone down in the last 10 years. We've had 2010, we had 8%, we're close to 6% now of state aid assistance. And some of that, it comes from not applying for Chapter 790 correctly or doing those things. So it's not just how people spend or how we're budgeting, it's also how we're collecting our revenue. I've said it before, we have a revenue problem, right? And I said that before I caught the Chapter 70 and pushed that forward, before I caught the Chapter 90, we have a revenue problem, and before we trend, we have to make sure we identify our revenue. And we really haven't done that well, so as we're trending forward, there could be a lot of mistakes that affect services, serious services, and I'd like to make sure we're doing that.
There was a community compact grant that we were awarded pertaining to financial trends.
Yep.
And I'm hoping that when they, hopefully going to start relatively soon, but trends just like you mentioned, if revenue and Chapter 90 is something that's
We've corrected a lot of it, but
then those are one of the trends that we want to be paying attention to. So feedback from you guys, again, is going to help us as we continue to evolve and get better and better at these practices. You know, we're not saying we have all the answers, obviously. We want to communicate more and over time get better and better at this.
Now, this is something I've mentioned. We are not allowed to be a political committee, right? And we're not elected, we're appointed, but politics can sometimes show a trend financially. And there are subsets of politics that like small government, that don't want to collect aid, that maybe the general public, if that is something that people are doing, they need to say that. They need to say, hey, we want to keep government small and see if the general public agrees with, because the trending in aid and support here is showing that Whitman citizens are not getting the support that even Halifax is. That we're not getting the aid support that wealthier towns are. Now, if that is what you believe is right, you say that and you put that out to the public and you say to them, hey, smaller government is best. We're going to pay a little bit more, we're going to have a little bit less rules, and that's what we want. But on a finance committee, I can't advocate for that. I'm going to advocate for the best financial, not political path forward. So some of the trends that I've been seeing, I'm a little concerned with, are intertwined with the political agenda.
All right, so let's step back just a little. Go ahead, Kathy.
No, is the impression that you believe that that's an intentional trend?
Well, we did divert $4.5 million through our regional school into another town. And that would be part of aid. And we do have a trend from 2000 arcing from 8% going downward to about 6% of total aid. But we don't have less people, and we don't have really wealthier people at that rate. So it concerns me that these numbers point to a trend. And if it's just people not paying attention or new people, that's it. But, and listen, I have no problem if somebody wants for libertarian. I have no problem. But
I don't think we're talking about political themes.
I'm just saying financially.
Let Kathy answer the question before we ask any more questions or have any more questions.
I'm just saying, so I'm not questioning whether those trends are happening. I'm just, the fact that if you believe that if that's an intentional trend, that concerns me.
Right. So wait a minute.
I'm seeing
Wait a minute.
consistent lower aid and lower support for Whitman taxpayers, whether it's intentional or not intentional. It should be corrected or explained.
So let's start with the explanation. Let's talk a little bit about state aid. What are we specifically talking about? Sources of state aid. Anybody?
Well, if this is a trend that we want to go back and kind of investigate a little bit and then come back.
Sure, I think that's probably the better answer.
I'm not here with all the answers again.
It should be
If you guys have some concerns or something like that, for sure.
Okay, so let's go back to your first comment was regarding the largest budget, the town department, right? So I think Mary Beth did call a meeting with the district, and we had two meetings, or you had two meetings specifically with our largest department. So you want to talk a little bit about that and how?
Well, we can't wait for their numbers to start our budget process, or we wouldn't make it for town meeting, right? If we waited until February to start the process and then start meeting with department heads. So unfortunately, when I met with Jeff, and I was quite honest and upfront with him, I told him that, we're looking at no more than 5%, because that's all we can do. And the word I used was very hopeful in my meeting. I came away from that meeting that he clearly, he gets it. So I'm putting in that 5% as a placeholder, and that's what I really want to end up seeing as the final number. But we could never wait for our largest budget to come in to start the process. So how, I don't know.
So okay, then other towns do it that way. It's our primary, the one budget we legally have to fund is the schools. That's our obligation. Government is structured that way.
Correct.
So if we have a problem with our school department not producing, I think that's really an issue we need to talk about. And I think we've talked about this in the past. There at least has to be an overall, what your staffing is going to be, and then at least a general idea of with some flexibility from that point. Because then we can determine, the percentage above the what they absolutely know, and then, work in a sort of cushion there. Because their absolutes could increase them beyond or below and give us an idea, So that's really where I would start. I would have it broken out into 3 different segments.
So Rosemary, that's where we really, if we're going to think about that, something we're going to think about for the future, really it's start with the school committee, right? All of the financial people that are here for the town can't start that process any earlier. No. We don't have the tools. We don't have the numbers. So, that's something we can talk about if we're looking for other things that we can do to change the way we do this and look for best practices. I think we're on the right path. I think, as you mentioned, we do have a lot of things that we've already initiated that are going to put us in a better place.
Yeah, and then just quickly, I know we're short on time. We ran an expenditure simulation. So obviously it's not completely accurate because we don't have all the accurate numbers yet, but we ran the simulation so that we could get some center of gravity and give you guys a better perspective of where we are. In conjunction with Mary Beth's, the budget messages she sent out to department heads. So doing that in conjunction with the revenue and expenditure forecast, I think really in late fall, puts us on solid ground as we go into the budget season. There's going to be department heads that are going to come in over that, and I think in some ways that's their prerogative, and that's them advocating for their departments. But I hope this gives you a better understanding of where the administration is coming from and why.
Sure. Okay. Anybody else have any general questions while we have all the John New?
Well, this is more of a specific question, but I don't have the package in front of me. Shame on me. However, when you presented that package, police and fire, we were told, were at about 3.5%. We had already talked to police and fire, and we knew that between the two of them, they were looking at 7 point something %. So I realize at some point you have to cut off development of a package. But why present us with a package and say, this is our best financial forecast, if you already know, because you've seen the budget before we've seen it, that police and fire are already at about 7%, not at the 3.5-ish that was projected in the document.
I don't want to speak for everybody, but all I can say is all the department heads got the same budget message. So if they choose to come in and present above that budget message, that was the expectation from the town administrator, then that's them doing it.
Right. So in the expenditure slide, it just said the Article 2 assumptions, and it's an assumption, right? I mean, that's what this was. And I mentioned this before, that this is a preliminary forecast. So the best expectation is they're going to always do that, as Sean said. I've been here a while, and a lot of the guys sitting at this table know that they come in and say, this is our wants, and then we'll come back later with the needs, right? Because they advocate for their department, as you said, so it doesn't help us narrow or shorten the time frame that we need to get work with the town administrator and the board of selectmen and all the department heads to get us to a balanced budget. But unfortunately, it's part of the process. I think we're all familiar with it. So,
Well,
could we do something to change that?
It was something that, me personally, it bothered.
Sure.
Only because if I see that, I already know that forecast isn't accurate. What else in the package would I call into question? Which is part of the reason we're all getting together tonight.
It's not that the forecast is inaccurate. It's like we ran a simulation just to give us the math on those assumptions.
Right.
Just to give us some math based on those assumptions. So that you could see if we came in with just like level funded departments and some of those other assumptions, we would have a small deficit or a deficit of whatever.
273,000.
Right. That's the math. That's the current math that we're working on. And then if a department head comes forward to you guys and says, I understand the math, but I still want to advocate for my department, that's them doing that. But
The biggest challenges that I think I saw in that area was the contractual union salaries, step increases, et cetera, which are not reflected in these numbers. So that would be something maybe to look at capturing for next year is we think it's 5%, but the reality is it was coming up to I think you were right, it was about 7% I think for the fire department. Because longevity and other such things, if there's a way for us to get that and then build the statistical model to take that into account, we'll have a much better accurate report in the future. But I think it was a good shot, first time. You got to start somewhere.
Right.
Okay. Anybody else, really quickly? Like I said, we want to get to the budget meetings that have been scheduled. John, did you have a follow-up?
Just one last comment, since there's two selectmen in the room. We learned last week the DPW still has the Lexington opportunity, let's say, in their contract. That's something that was supposed to go away, we thought.
We were told.
We were informed that there's one that qualifies next year, there's another one that will qualify the year after. And if I was in a department, I would be bailing into that contract really quick as soon as there was an opening in the DPW to take advantage of the 5-5,
Well, in this
Pay
case, it's a
increase.
7-7. Yeah.
Seven.
7.
Point
Yeah.
7-7.
point of order, just quickly.
It's worse than I thought.
Just, we are not supposed to talk about any specific union, or any specific union negotiations, if it's correct.
We're talking about
The Lexington was part of the union.
right, but we're talking collectively, all collective bargaining
all collective
agreements.
Okay,
So we're not talking specifically about any one particular.
but we can remind whoever you don't negotiate that one. Do you negotiate with the DPW, or does their board? Does the
There would be somebody from the TA.
yeah? So we should send a reminder that that was a decision. Maybe they were uninformed.
So John is more or less just bringing it up that there's not a sunset on that Lexington thing because there are still collective bargaining agreements that have that as a clause in their collective bargaining
I
agreement.
listen to all,
No, go ahead.
I listen to your meetings and I hear you loud and clear. We have to be more careful about the contracts that we negotiate and make sure they're in line with our financial forecast.
Okay, good point, John. Thank you for bringing that up. Anybody else really quickly? We thank you all for attending the meeting, and your presence here is always appreciated. All right? Tom, you're now up front and center.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
New Year. We made it through another one. We
Tom, we're going to go around the board. We have one new member, and
Yes.
we'll do introduction.
fantastic.
Mitchell,
Nice to see you around.
Mike Warner.
Hi there. Nice to
John
meet you. Hi, John. Kathleen.
Val Cafferty.
Al.
And Chuck Colby, John.
Chuck.
Welcome
And
back.
Rick Anderson.
And Tom Hickey.
And we
And
have
Salvucci.
Dan, thank you for coming as well. We look forward to you being here when the...
Can I trouble you, Jen?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So thank you for having us in. I guess I'd start with a few times in the last 12 or 13 budget cycles.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. You're welcome. We have, this is a copy of my budget presentation that I made to the school committee on December 20th. There's a recording of it as well that was posted to our website. I'll go through the highlights. It's a mix of the budget and the other big elephant, this MSBA project that you've heard me talk about, and where are we now, and there's been some good chatter about cost, and I'd be happy to spend as much time as is permitted, Mr. Chair, on any of the above, but I don't want to gloss over fiscal 25. But because it's early in January, the one piece of paper I can't give you would be the what's our share of the assessment. But I can certainly I can talk around it, and then on January 25th, which I think is the day after. I think that we'll get the numbers on the 24th of January. I think hopefully we'll keep refreshing the website. We'll see what our Chapter 70 state aid is, and then we'll quickly be able to back out the difference. We have a school committee meeting on January 25th where we'll be able to at least put that out there for the first time. How does this budget increase affect my community? A couple of fun facts. I don't know where the horseshoe is or the unicorn or whatever, but we've had an assessment drop recently, even though there's been enrollment that has increased. And I think, and you can double check this. I don't have hard numbers, but I think there was a recent shift in full day K, which bumped up enrollment numbers, which shifted dollars to WHRSD, because I could have fallen out of my chair saying to you folks last winter, yeah, we're up 11 kids. Oh, and your assessment went down 30 grand. I will never be able to say that again. And then I'm saying, how did that happen?
Rosemary found that. She found out where the smoking gun was a while ago.
You do a great job.
Yeah, thank you. But
really
I had
do.
nothing to do with those.
But
I had nothing to do with that.
Often there is a comparison that is poor, that says our local schools are not and are doing a bad job, and our vocational is so wonderful. And last year you were accredited for monies that essentially Jeff got. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Essentially,
It shifted the foundation numbers, which meant that there were fewer dollars that Whitman was tagged with paying. So.
And we have wonderful options across the board.
Sure.
For all kinds of kids and all kinds of minds, and it's beautiful. And I hope that people will start to view our budgeting process that way,
Yeah.
continue the proper funding for youth as well.
Oh, you've always been very good to us, so we just have to keep showing you the facts and let you know where we're headed. So that was an anomaly. I know they've recently posted the Sims reports on the DESI website. When you go to those district profiles on the DESI website and you look at Whitman Hanson, you've got to tease out the Whitman numbers. So I'm not sitting here tonight. If you were asking the question, could this happen again? I think it would be, what's the delta with Whitman's enrollment? That I don't know the answer to that. But that may be a factor as we get in a little deeper.
Whole time less.
Okay.
We want to offset the whole time less. And that helps us across the board. That was I think I called Rick and I said, we got to get kids in those seats.
If you don't pull out of hold harmless, the Chapter 70 is flat while costs go up. Once you pull yourself out with more enrollment, then your state aid can grow.
And it's been a poor financial plan locally for both towns to not recognize hold harmless as debt.
So
Really
let's let Todd run through his presentation. I just, for
Tom's budget.
those following along too, we're on page 5 of 9, if you're looking at the Article 2, and vocational education is Department 20, and the South Shore Regional Voc Technical High School is line 321. So,
Okay.
but with that, we'll let you
Thank
go
you, Rick.
right into your presentation.
Opening slides tell the school committee about a little bit of bragging, a little flexing on some of the wonderful things we've done, our accomplishments, and setting some goals. We've done a great job with grant acquisitions recently, millions of dollars, which has allowed me, and I think I said this at a forum we had earlier in December, it's allowed me to be able to, made it easier to not have to come and look for capital dollars for equipment. So that everyone's a winner. A zero-based budgeting process where we have our departments review from the ground up, and we do know there are fixed costs certainly, but we do at least kick the tires in all the areas, and that usually allows me to move around some discretionary dollars, because the electrical shop needs this in 1 year, they don't need it in another year. You've heard me say this many times. It seems to work. It seems to work, and the numbers bear it out. So on the second piece of paper, where I have a slide that gives you the first real numbers page, which is at the bottom of the second piece of paper, or the third page of the presentation, is where I break down this budget increase. So the proposal clocks in at 5.62%. And I break it down in 3 ways. This is an unusual year. I've never had to do this before and won't have to do this again, I hope. But I needed to point out that I'll start at the bottom. There's a small sliver of this increase that I'll be asking the school committee to take out of our excess and deficiency account and not directly pass the costs on. And that is for this district-wide ballot we hope to do in January of 2025 for this MSBA project. Based on some estimates of what it would cost to run a local election, had a good meeting with all town clerks earlier in December to start talking about this so as to not bother them during the general election cycle that is in this calendar year. So it was a good opportunity to talk about that. So when we are able to break down the town assessment numbers, we're going to show revenue. We're going to show revenue from Chapter 70. We're going to show revenue from non-resident tuition. And we'll show a revenue line that we haven't shown before in memory, which would be a line for excess and deficiency. This is just it's a 1-year offset. So for me to sit here and say, well, the district is going to absorb the costs of this election, is to then have someone say, and who pays for that budget?
Yeah, right.
So that's laundry. That's laundry. But at least out of the piggy bank, we can cover the cost of that election. The other 2 items up above, the capital budget, we've had some success with lease-to-purchase propane buses. They're due for a renewal. This was all part of a longer-term forecast. There's some equity here, and I think we actually are going to be able to buy it off a state contract a little sooner. So I think that capital budget increase will give us an adjustment. We have some money in stabilization that will either offset it over a 5-year period. But this will get me from the $180K ahead in capital for this current fiscal year to $320. That number should cover what we need for a bus fleet. If we run into budget problems downstream, a little later in the presentation I'll talk about what's up with the revenue, then I would look back at that and maybe be a little less here and a little more into stabilization. But I feel good about where we were coming up to the 2017 lease, where we had some stabilization money. It allowed us to give a haircut on the capital piece. And then the operating budget is about 3.88. So that's how the overall number breaks down. And again, sadly, nowhere in here does it say, and this is what it means for Whitman. But I would say to you right now that if there is no major shift in enrollment, what I have said, and I've said it in years past, is without these numbers available, you take last year's per pupil cost, which was about $10,600 a kid, maybe you throw in an inflation factor, and maybe multiply that by the increase in kids. If we had no other compass to go by, that's ultimately what I would be saying to you right now. And I'll be wrong to some extent, but at the very least, if the enrollments are the same and we have an increased market share of the enrollment, that's a place where it could land. That's how it's landed in the past. But there are so many, you know the story, there are so many state factors that we don't know to be factual right now. Anyway, the second, I'll go on to the next page. That's the next slide is probably the next most important FinCom slide, which is, okay, break down these operating numbers. What do where are these increases coming from? But I start with the first bullet that says, watch the revenue. And I've said this collectively for the last several years. As our non-resident enrollment has gone down, our non-resident tuition has gone down, and our in-district enrollment collectively has increased. So for the last 3 years, the question for me has been, will there be a gap between the drop-off of one revenue source and the increase of another? So far, I think in part with the Student Opportunity Act infusing a little more money beyond what we maybe have normally expected, we have made out okay. But I'd say it again, that if on January 25th we find that there is a revenue gap, well then that calls into question the whole structure of the budget. And that's my message to the committee, that there's a plan B to reduce as soon as we know what those numbers are. We'll have to give it a day or so to settle, but I've run some simulations for myself to say, well, where would I go? Not to say that we can't pass on more of the cost, but I'm operating on the assumption that as much of a budget increase that can be covered by state aid would be a wonderful story. That's oftentimes what we're able to do. We're able to gauge that. If we could have a town's increase be clearly explained as, oh, we went up 15 kids, and that's an explanation. But in any given year, we don't know exactly how that's going to turn out. So for now, this is part of my put a bookmark here. I'll be happy to come back in February if you want to have me back again and walk through, but certainly we'll get it in your hands on January 25th. So the breakdown is, watch the revenue. Oh, here comes Marshfield, the 9th community. So for the next 4 years, we'll have 9 communities. So in this budget sheet that you'll get at the end of the month, this will be the first time you'll see a 9th community listed. So Marshfield is going to be dealt into a share of the operating costs. It's not going to be big. It's not going to be big initially, but they will be dealt in. They could have... we're seeing that maybe might have 25 kids a year. So you'll see the Marshfield number and the Marshfield share of operating and capital go up. But that's another wild card. We don't know exactly what that is for right now. I mentioned about the lease bus fleet, and I mentioned about the cost of the ballot question. The breakdown on personnel, this is my continued efforts to incrementally move some positions from grants onto budget. Again, for some of these positions, it's not a full move, but it's an incremental move. A part-time school nurse, speech pathologist, adjustment counselor, special ed teacher, technical aid. If we can move these, so that when you ask me, like, what's your plan B? For the IDEA grant, that would be an example of, okay, it's an entitlement grant, it's probably not going to have a massive cut. If I can't afford all of what I'm looking to move onto budgets, I would look at those entitlement grants that are renewed and say, all right, well, we'll have to pump the brakes on that. As I said before, maybe we are not as aggressive on renewing the lease. But there would be a few places that we could move. And then under new personnel, something that I have not prioritized, and I'm hoping that this will be the right time, is to add a second physical education health and wellness teacher. So we're a school of 670 students. I have one phys ed teacher. And so it's overdue. And if we can fit it in at 75, that's all budget, that's all hard money. So that's a direct increase in operating. The next item is a medical assisting teacher, which I currently have an aide who's it's an allied health program with 2 registered nurses who are health assisting teachers, and I have an aide who's funded on the budget. And my thought process is, and we've been talking about this for a few years, about upgrading that position to making it a teaching position, but the upgrade would not add any more to the budget. This would be a grant-funded upgrade. We get a federal grant, a Perkins grant, that I think that if we have to wait for the summer, we've got to wait till the feds tell us what that allotment is. So maybe that's a nice if we can, but I'm not prioritizing that as a personnel item on hard money budget for fiscal 25.
Can I ask a quick
Sure,
question?
yeah, anyone, please, feel free to jump in. You've seen these slides many times, and it's better to interrupt.
So, how does the termination of the ESSER 3 funds affect your budget?
I don't see any cliff. Okay, so what I would say to you, Kathleen, is let's take the part-time school nurse. That's a position that I brought on with ESSER. So that's an example of something that we've only had one school nurse. I've started last year bringing, I think I brought $8,000 or $9,000 onto the budget. So there's something, the total cost of the part-time nurse is in the low 40s. So that amount there is the rest of what was funded. But I'm happy to say that I don't see any major cliff. I don't have sizable operating expenses that we're going to say where's it coming from. If you're looking at, as you look at those 5 bullets of moving personnel, the adjustment counselor, the speech pathologist is a combination of hard money and IDEA grants, Medicaid reimbursement. There might be a little bit of ESSER in there, but I'm coming in with some retirements, not concerned about how to fund it. It's really just the extent. So that's why my first priority would be if it's an if it's a renewable entitlement grant and I can't make the numbers work, that's where I go first to say we'll try again next year to close the gap. Please, again, folks, interrupt. The next slide is just a brag sheet on the grants we've received that we've competed for, as well as the entitlement grants below that I've referenced earlier. Turning the page, typical enrollment slides I've shown you in the past. You can find the Whitman line, and you can see that Whitman is up 14 students. So we've seen an increase from the 2020 numbers, 135, 140, 151, 165. Yep. And then the aggregate numbers below. On the slide below, you'll see at the bottom of these bar charts this kind of bell curve of these gold numbers here. Those are the non-resident kiddos. So as those numbers went up, the non-resident tuition went up, and that tuition was passed back to the communities to offset assessments. And that's really where I come back to the will a decreasing yellow as a revenue source be offset by Chapter 70? Highest enrollment in school history in this final column here, and it doesn't even show up. It's not even big enough. Well, I guess I can see at the bottom there. There are six non-resident kids as of the last October 1 reports. So that 14 up above is where I go back to all right, well, what would, if you had to bet $1, I would say, well, from what I can control, I'd say take last year's per pupil cost, add in a little inflation, multiply it by 14. If Mary Beth needs a placeholder, that's probably where that would be my suggestion of where to start. And then I'll sound a lot more accurate when we actually have some accurate numbers to talk about. Please, Rosemary, yeah.
So, from the hearing from December 4th, the revenue hearing in the state, it's looking like there'll be a decrease. Are you prepared? It's not going to be as heavy as it was, is what I'm... Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, well, I've heard that there's a very conservative inflation factor. So when you had a high inflation number, everything goes up. The aid goes up. The expectations. So the caution out there is, if the inflation factor is only 1.46 or no more than 2%, but actual costs are higher, that's the gnashing of teeth that you hear from all municipalities and obviously from districts. So that's where I guess I'm definitely focused on that.
1.6%.
1.6.
Yep.
Okay. So that to me is because I can see that I've got a net increase of I've got a 41 student in district increase. Now in years past I would say oh my, there we go. 41, but I can't say that with any degree of confidence because I don't know how these inflation factors are going to translate, and the legislature needs to continue to fund that Student Opportunity Act to make sure that's a little extra juice in the state aid system. So, if I walk in and say if we don't see enough of a state aid increase, that's the revenue gap. Yes, that's what.
Okay, so with the Student Opportunity Act, the primary money, the primary aid is coming out of districts that hold high level of ESL and low income.
Yeah, they would definitely get more, yes.
And your district, you have low income, but not ESL, right?
Correct, correct. We have definitely benefited, but I think everyone has this collective question mark about how will we see it translate? So, yeah, and again, I did feel this way the last couple of years, but again, it's kind of like Groundhog Day. Here we are again. Is there going to be a gap? If there is a gap, then we'll address it. So the nightmare scenario is 41 student increase. There better be more state aid for 41 additional students. Okay, let's say there is. But if I'm dropping off 33 minus 6 and then to 0, if the non-resident. So, but I'll come back with a plan on how we're going to make it
When
work.
it's 41, when I'm looking at the demographics of the towns that are primarily supplying, those are primarily, except for Whitman, because you're low income. You get Hanson, Abington, maybe you'll get more low income.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're
And there
not
is an
gonna get
increment
any
for that.
ESL or-
Very limited.
Yeah.
It's special ed increment and it's
Oh,
low
special.
income increment. That if you ever look at our Chapter 70 foundation budget sheet and you see where do we get beyond the peanut butter and jelly diet, it's in primarily those two indicators. Just a little bit of ESL, a handful of kids. So that's, as of this point, if you are tight for time, that's budget. That's full stop budget. The rest of this presentation, and I don't presume to take up your time, Rick, on this, but the rest of the presentation is, hey, here's what goes into the budget formula. Most of you have seen the back of the next page. This is how we break down the assessments. More to come on that. And then I throw in a few slides on the MSBA project update. There's no cost impact for fiscal 25 for this building project, save for that E&D reference I made earlier to cover the cost of let the voters weigh in on whether they want this or not. If we do see something for this project, if we are successful, it would be in fiscal 26, probably a bond anticipation note, and that would be apportioned on the debt line. But I'm happy if there's time, and I won't presume to go any deeper on that. But if you'd like.
Go ahead, Rosemary.
I just had a quick question, and I'm asking this because we regularly don't have, and maybe I've missed it, possibly I could have missed it, your regional school, just like our current regional school.
Yeah.
And when we borrow from them, or we do this, we don't usually require them to pay for their elections. What laws is there something in 71?
Yeah, actually there is, yeah. So it's 16N.
Okay.
And that's 16 with a lowercase n, not the 16 capital N. I've done it. Where's that capital N? It's the
We've
6.
done it before, too.
I've done that before.
Yeah.
Right.
Plenty of times.
So yeah, they bake in a lot of real specific things. So an election that is no fewer than 4 hours and no more than 8 hours,
Okay.
baked into the law. The cost to be borne by the regional district that runs the ballot. So the school committee invokes 16N and all of the responsibilities that come with it. So
Okay, so you've invoked it, but that's an intentional, you didn't have to, or?
you have to decide. There are 3 paths under 7116.
Oh,
There's 16D, which is go to each town separately for a town meeting. And then also in 16D, there's a separate paragraph for vocational schools, which says, I've had to say this, it sounds so stupid, but it just is. It's just, you could invoke a different paragraph that says, if a town votes against it, they don't have to pay it, but the kids from that town cannot utilize the capital improvement that you made with the money.
How are you going to do that?
Not that bathroom, Rick. That bathroom,
Right.
the outhouse.
Yeah, right.
So no Voc school has ever used that provision. So it's really
That is pretty obscure.
How could you do that?
I don't know. There are really 2 options, and so the district-wide ballot option is when we talked to the town clerks, they said. Yeah, leave us alone through most of 24, but like January 25th, a Saturday in January 2025, they're on board with January 25th. We're going to meet with them again in April to talk about, all right, we got to decide mornings, afternoons, but it was nice to have them all together to collectively share, professionally, how they run their elections, and a lot of stuff over my head and voting machine tallies, and guess what? You don't have to report by precinct. And a roar of cheers went up, and I, okay, I'm glad we're getting together.
I did have want to make it clear that I love that you've added the agricultural.
Oh, vet science.
Vet
Yes,
science
if we get a new
about-
school, we'll have a vet science and a plumbing program, yeah.
But
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, I just don't want to get to Sean. I just want to ask one quick question on,
I was finishing. That was just reaching out for that. I was going to ask the hard one. When you just mentioned in the last statement, when you do something, you're not, part of 7116 would say, oh, the kids who, you can not vote against it, but you won't be eligible for something.
Right.
I want to point out the way the debt structure is now, and the way that we have allotted amounts, and we're going by past usage opposed
Yes.
to future usage. Has Whitman currently subsidizing, or may not even subsidizing, because possibly they wouldn't give up. It's a different product now than you will be providing in the future, and therefore most likely a town would want to utilize it. I would ask, personally, as a citizen, that you change that to the broken out by allotments, because to have us be paying for a future project in which another town has first rights of having children in there, it seems the same thing. It seems like the emboss of here, you'll pay for it, and then they most likely aren't going to give up those extra slots to come back. So that's not something, I think that's something that really has to be looked at.
Yes, and Rick, if I can, I'll
Go
just
ahead.
real briefly. Yes, I do think the idea has merit. I do think it needs to be looked at. I've asked our regional planning subcommittee to convene this month, and I've done an analysis of what that could or could not mean. We've looked at, and just for a quick context, we fix our debt share, doing a 3-year look back. If we get this project approved, Whitman's share will be higher than all of our other communities, and that is in direct alignment with the popularity of the community. The feeling that in 5 or 10 or 15 years the number of kiddos from Whitman doesn't match that number, you can't help but feel like, boy, we bought high. Boy, we really peaked at the wrong time. That stinks. So I think there are two ways to go about there are two ways to deal with it. The first is to look closely at the pros and cons of what does an adjustable debt share look like. Is it an annual apportionment like Whitman Hanson does? Is it a rolling average like we do for capital? Is it some other process that levels out some peaks and valleys? Or, and I'm not, this is now just me talking as I'm trying to also think through this, or do we as a school district rethink how we apportion seats and say, wait a minute, if we don't change the debt share, then maybe we no longer use 8th grade enrollment as what determines the number of seats a town gets. Maybe we take a look at some other formula that might look, let's say we did a multi-year look back on actual enrollment in the schoolhouse. So in other words, if Whitman's paying 24% of the school, shouldn't they get like 24% of the seats? Now for people who don't want to pay for anything because of limited income, the idea of an operating budget hovering high, people have the right to say, oh, no, bad idea. Bad idea. Let me take my discount as your operating assessment goes like this, because our seats go like this, and we're stuck with the debt up here. I could totally understand somebody saying that, but if we're talking about the access and payment, so our regional planning subcommittee is going to take a look at this. We're going to take a look at the pros and cons. You all know to revise a regional agreement. That is a town meeting process. We would bring this to all 9 of our town meetings. If it gets from the regional planning subcommittee to the full school committee, and the full school committee votes by a 2/3, I think it's 2/3, to launch it, then it goes to each of our 9, what I would say would be 9. And we've got to be careful with Marshfield. Marshfield comes on board in July. It might be tone deaf for us to go and move something forward just as a new community is coming on board. So maybe it's the fall of 24. But again, I'm taking your idea, Rosemary, and I'm just...
And you're rolling with it.
I'm rolling with it to say
I
that...
don't want to be paying for a building that, this is a different product, and of course, kids from Whitman are most likely going to want it even more, right?
Yeah.
And
An adjustable can go up or down, and that's...
And then-
we're all risk averse to some extent,
the
like...
enrollment number, the people who are paying the least amount may have first dibs on it.
And all that would change for them is their operating, you're right, their operating
have-
assessment would go up. What I can say is this, that whatever happens in the next 6 to 12 months on this idea of making it adjustable, with Marshfield coming in the district, all of our current 8 towns will see a haircut. So if Marshfield sends us 20 to 25 kids a year for a 4-year period, that's about 12%. So that is not a fact, it's just math. It's just potential math. So anyway, that is something that's definitely...
It could be a simpler solution. You could base the debt on your current, with your current allotment.
We could. My fear of an annually adjust, because it's such a big number, I would be concerned if one town loses interest and blue-collar towns fill the void like that. With such a large chunk, it could throw off an assessment. So a rolling average to me just feels like
Like every 3 years kind of thing.
We do that for capital. So any capital that we have that isn't debt that we build into the budget, we've done on a 3-year rolling average. But these are the things that I'm going to ask the committee to take a closer look at.
What I want to sort of say is that essentially we do a little bit more outreach. And I think it's good. I think every school should do it. But it can't be a percentage of our payment responsibility, a result of poor outreach in other places.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know that's a decision from towns that to some degree there has to be equitable outreach and there has to be equitable,
A constant lament of mine, but
I know,
Whitman does it right.
teaching.
Whitman does it right.
Because you want to have children going where they're going to find themselves.
That's right.
Okay, but we don't want to spend too much more time on that one.
That's going to cost
good
us
point.
essentially.
Good point.
There's one more other point.
Well, wait 1 second, we have 2 other people.
All right.
Go ahead, Sean.
Well, I was actually going to ask about the regional agreement. I didn't know if there was a plan in place to open negotiations, because, I'm just one selectman, but from what I've understood, I feel like we really do need, it'd be in our best interest to really renegotiate that.
Yeah, so Sean, the way that it would work would be, the process is either through the citizen petition. If you read our regional agreement, there's a section 7 talks about amendments.
Yeah.
Citizen petition with certain number of voters, but more likely the regional planning subcommittee to the school committee. And that's what I would like to have the school committee take a look at over the next month or 2, which would be, if we were going to adjust the debt, the way that debt is calculated, what would we replace it with? And I think the answer is some sort of frequency
Sure.
of recalculation.
One other thing to consider, though, I think, is the obvious. Right now, the per pupil expenditure is like 12 or 13,000 for a Whitman Hanson student, but like 20,000 for a
Yes.
Situate student.
Yes.
So taking that into consideration with debt as well, I think, is an obvious consideration. But it's a 2/3. The problem I'm having with it is it's a 2/3 vote to get it to town meeting for the school committee.
It might be a simple majority to get it out of school committee to the warrants.
I would have a hard time advocating for the building without that being looked at.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, and with Whitman having a high share, that's where the discussion should go. I would want people to say, boy, we have a high share, and if our numbers drop, that's not going to feel right.
You still have to hold all that.
Yeah, and then the counter to that is, well, we had 100 kids from Whitman Middle School come on tours. That number could go up. So it's really that there's no wrong or right answer. I think if we air out the ideas and we bring it, and part of what I'm doing is I'm meeting with town administrators to say, look, I want you to start thinking about this, because that could be true for anybody.
Sure, but I think
Wait a minute.
the problem I'm seeing with the numbers, though, is 5 people there could be an incentive for 5 of those districts to say, we like how it is right now. And why would I vote in favor of it? You know what I mean? If you're a Situate and you felt like you're going to kind of stay status quo, and why would you want to pay more of any sort of debt proportion?
When I look at about 20 years worth of enrollment data, all of our towns have a range of lowest. It's like, oh, I wish we locked in the debt, like you lock in your mortgage rate. But you're right, there are wider swings with more popular communities. So a town like Whitman, over the last 20 years, probably has had anywhere from 16 to 25% share of the enrollment. A town like Cohasset also has a variance, but their variance is 0.4% to 2%. When I go and talk to folks in Whitman, they're at 6.6% if I use the same formula. But their issues, it's not that they're not high-fiving one another over that, but they also are, they're looking, I've asked them to consider it through a lens of, are you risk averse? Because it could go down. The number could go down, and shouldn't it go, shouldn't it be tied to enrollment? So I think the idea is, I personally think the idea is worthy of study. I've looked at other regional VOC agreements. Most of them are what Whitman-Hanson does. Most of them adjust debt, maybe on an annual basis, maybe not. So I think there's some merit to it. So it's not. I have no personal vested interest in slow boating the idea because I think it gets in the way of the overall conversation about the project. So if we clock in at 24.25% for Whitman right now, and we know Marshfield's the number will come down because of the Marshfield factor. Okay, that's fine. And then in 3 or 4 years, that'll settle. Like Marshall will have filled its 4 years worth of kids. And what percentage will that be? 10, 12, 15? So yeah, there'll be a haircut. So maybe Whitman's actual number might be 21%, but that doesn't address the core issue. That's just like a temporary reprieve, So that's.
Dan, wait a minute. Dan, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, my issue with changing it, and I got to really think about it, is like our assessment, our kids went up by 14 students. We had 100 8th graders look at our school. We've had the most students right along. I was really surprised at Situate going up 14 students. I was surprised at that.
Yeah, Situate
Right.
and Hanover the last couple of years
And
have
I
been
was really
closed.
surprised at that, but usually it's the style of people, the Situates, the Cohassets, their kids do something different. They don't go into vocational education as much as the Whitman, Abington, Hanson, Rockland, right? Different style of families. I'm afraid if the new school passes and we go with the 105 kids, that means you can probably get 805. You
That's
can get
one of-
860 kids in there.
Yeah.
We all, because our school's built for 600 students. We
Right.
got 78 too many students, Of course, Hanover's looking like this in a sewer system, right?
Oh, no.
But anyways, I'm afraid that if we change the system, 24% could go up to 35%. That's what I'm afraid of. Because I think it opens the door, if the new school passes and it's built, if it opens the door to another 200 students being able to go into Whitman, South Shore Tech, where is the majority of those students going to come from? Because we're turning away Whitman students all the time. And for us to say, I'm sorry, you can't go.
Yeah.
What?
Good point.
I'm sorry, Rick.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Go ahead.
If each town was at capacity, if each town sent at capacity what
Yes.
they were entitled to,
Yes.
what would Whitman's share be?
Half.
Half of
We'd
it.
have to start
I
telling
would
kids,
say
no, you can't go.
Whitman would be, if I use current numbers, Sean, it would be about 20 kids a year. Whitman is at 165. They would be at 80.
We'd have to be at 80 if all districts were sending what they
Yep.
were entitled to by.
They're
Yeah.
allotted amounts.
Based on the current way we do it, Rosemary, that is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if with the new building, each district some of the districts that don't seat all of the seats that they have.
We get their extras, correct?
That's right. That's
We get
exactly.
their extras right
Well,
now.
according to a
And
formula.
this is where I was saying, Sean,
Yeah.
it should be done by the allotted amounts. And because if it goes, this is a different product. You're about to go in on it, and it could save. I want to say, this is an expensive project, but when he's taking, look at, your child goes to Aggie, that's even more than social protect. So we could be taking some of those Aggie kids and putting them within that regional bargain, because outside of one of our regional schools, there's an opportunity to save with this that I really think is great.
There's a lot of scenarios here, and I don't think we really don't want to
But
spend
the
too
part I
much
wanted
time
to-
on it
the part
tonight.
The part I wanted to mention, this is going to be a train wreck if we
I
do
know,
it right. So
but
if you
I
don't
think
mind.
the process is in play. we're getting
Yep.
together.
I've put together a presentation for the subcommittee. I'm hoping they're going to meet the week of January 8th. So, yes, I definitely am invested, and I'd be happy to come back. We can talk about
Okay.
it. No
So
fiscal,
we can
no
make
fiscal
another
25 impact.
time when Tom can come back.
Sure,
When
happy to.
When the subcommittee gets together and talks about ideas and throws around different scenarios. But I don't think that we want to spend too much time on it now because we're really, we got.
It's ahead of the game. Yeah.
It really is. Oh, not that it's not good to be ahead of the game. You've heard some excellent ideas, some presentations here.
Right.
Well, it's on the forefront of everybody's mind.
Right.
A community,
Absolutely.
a community that.
We need something to support financially.
Yeah.
Because if it gets to a point where it's so expensive that it would be better to draw in vocational back into our public schools, there's a threshold, there is a tipping point here.
Oh, absolutely.
And some of these scenarios, you're getting pretty close to that tipping point financially.
And that's part of what the building committee will be looking at by the end of the month. And
Especially with Whitman being so many
yeah,
students.
blue collar community, just committed to a middle school, loves the school, very popular, very expensive. That's and it's you can't marry all of that together, and
You need
that's
And a DPW.
Yes,
And I
yeah,
think it's a
there are
mistake to say
competing
just Whitman
capital-
students. I think it's a mistake to say just, it's coming from blue collar towns. Every town has a builder. And each kid in every town, every town has a different demographics. We don't have one. It's the outreach. There needs to be more outreach. And I understand that some towns are prohibiting that, which is a shame, but as a result, we can't subsidize.
right. My experience has been
That's
that
why the allotment would encourage them to.
communities that have been resistant to provide the access that Whitman Middle does are ones that we have deep roots. So fortunately, I have a community that doesn't allow our guidance counselors to come in and do interviews on site. But so we find workarounds, and those are other battles. But Rick, if I can make one more quick
Go ahead. Yep.
comment, and Rosemary, you mentioned at the forum. I just want to, since we're sitting here,
Oh, yeah.
I have done outreach to MSBA asking them to unpack that MSBA reimbursement, and I framed it like this. There's a concern from one of my blue-collar, oversubscribed communities that the mere presence of an affluent community in our district skews the reimbursement rate. And what I want you to tell me is just because I have this zip code attached to my district doesn't mean that you treat them like 1/9 or 1/8 of the district, but you actually care about the number of kids. Because if 3 kids from a really wealthy community are part of this MSBA formula, then that's better than you simply saying, oh, you've got this affluent community baked in. So I had a Zoom meeting, and I'm asking them specifically, you gave us a reimbursement rate for our feasibility of 55 and change %. Great, whatever. We're not changing that. I'm not asking you to change that. I want you to tell me about the income and the poverty and the property factors, and how did you arrive at those increments with 8 communities feeding into it. So I'll let you and I'll let interested folks know once I get an answer on that. But so that's been launched.
Excellent. Good
Thank you,
feedback.
Rick.
Yep. Okay, and then just one thing, and I'll open it up one last time. But back to the budget and line 321, South Shore VOTEC fiscal 24 was $1,604,150. Right now we have a place setter of $1,764,550. So does that kind of calculate the way you said, where you take the per student and you multiply it by the 14?
Was that about 160K?
I did the math.
Thank you. Yeah. So maybe if you add in a couple % on last year's per pupil.
So 160,415 increase. So
That's 14 kids using last year's per pupil numbers and
adding a little sprinkle of
cola. Yeah.
It's a little more, but yeah, it's right in line with that number
Okay.
that you gave.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure we're using the right place setter as we're.
You're using the least worst place setter with no state aid to talk about. Yes.
Yep, and it was preliminary.
So
and
apologies in advance.
we appreciate you coming. A wealth of knowledge was distributed. Go ahead, Kathleen.
I have one more question. It has to do with the vote on the MSBA project.
Yes.
Is it scheduled for January something?
Penciled January 25th. That was just a kind of a consensus. I don't know how town clerks do their jobs, but there's probably a local bylaw where they've got a. There again, going back to Rosemary's point about the.
Understand me, when your school committee votes or your building committee votes,
Yeah.
which project? You have a.
Oh, I'm sorry. Coincidentally, it's January 25th. So on January 25th
Big
of
day.
2024, that will. let me walk that back, Kathleen, I'm sorry. On January 17th, we're going to have a meeting where the project team is going to present the actual estimates based on something called reality. It's going to be, here's what it'll cost for 805 kids, here's what it'll cost for 900 kids, maybe the new versions have some slight tweaks. Now, if there's a consensus on January 17th to say, oh, okay, this is it. I personally, as a member of the building committee myself, so I can speak for myself, I wouldn't want to vote that day. I would like us to say thank you and good night, and we have a meeting scheduled on January 25th, 2024, where we would come together to vote on it. So if I'm outvoted, well, then I'll have to do my homework quickly. But I think it's too big of a process to get the numbers that night and say, there's a $12 million difference between these versions. So, and then coincidentally, 1 year later, January 25th, 2025. But you didn't ask that question, so that's the ballot.
It's the night that you choose was it the preferred schematic report that you submit for the...
Yes, that's exact. We would have to vote on the 25th to authorize the project team to send the PSR in. Yeah, and we have a January 31st deadline of turning that in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that'll
Just
put it...
curious, when are we meeting on the 25th?
I was thinking, Dan, both meetings, it's a joint meeting, both at 6, so we'll do building committee stuff, or school committee stuff, because the school committee also has to vote to amend the... I'm sorry.
That's okay.
School committee also has to vote to amend the educational plan, some other procedural votes. So probably 6 o'clock for both meetings.
So we're going to meet the 25th and the other one the 24th?
The 17th,
17th,
yeah,
right.
the 17th is our normal monthly meeting, but since we have no governor's numbers, we'll go school committee light agenda, building committee, where's the money, and then we'll wait 8 days hopefully and vote on it on the
We're going to meet
25th.
at what, 6?
Yeah,
I have fun.
yeah,
Okay.
6 for both. I'll recommend. Yeah.
Okay, does anybody have any other questions for Tom?
No, nice job,
No, just
Tom.
a big
Every year.
I have a question. This is on a total different subject. Dollars for scholars is always looked at as something very positive.
Absolutely.
Any idea when the Taste of Whitman might be coming back again?
Oh, I don't get to make that decision.
Michael
It's
Gancher.
Mike does that. It's historically been in March, and we've had our culinary kids and our night school kids. They were there last year, so we intend to participate again. But I think from muscle memory, it's
Yeah, it's usually in March.
It's
usually
happened
it's in March, yeah.
Typically.
Nice night.
First couple weeks of March.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's always a good take.
We have a great culinary
Amazing
program.
food truck at the Christmas tree.
Oh, thank
Oh.
you. Thank you. I gave them that suggestion. My wife and some friends, they do a Barry Manilow tree every year.
Oh,
And yeah, they do a Barry Manilow tree every year, and I had to buy this audio thing that when you walk, this motion sensor that when you walk by it, that was my homework assignment for like October, November. Buy this, make the thing, too much information.
All right.
You know how to reach me if you have questions in between, but otherwise, email to you, Rick,
Yep.
and to Chuck,
Yep, very
January
good.
25th on the assessment numbers.
I don't
All
know
right.
if I-
And then you can haul me back in here if it's a number that starts with a 2.
Nice
on
presentation,
your
Tom.
food and-
Thank you so much,
On
Al, I
your
appreciate
food
it.
and culinary, when we did up at the State House, when we had all the vocational
Oh, yeah,
schools
yeah, they had
and
Dan Hill.
Our vocation was the best. I tried them all.
Yes, unbiased.
All right, Dan, thank you for coming.
You know, palate
John, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
All right.
Thanks, everybody,
Have a
for the
good night.
extended time. I appreciate
All
it.
right. Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
I don't want
All
to
right.
compare kids, but our kids were.
That's okay.
Is Dan Kelly out there? Can you see?
He was.
I think he left.
Yeah.
You think he left?
No, he was out there. We'll go take a look.
Rolling bird bites really hard.
I keep saying that, didn't I
Because,
message you?
well, you're going up by 50% of the number of potential
They didn't leave, they're
students.
still here.
So instead of 165, you could have 200.
When this came in, I said to everybody, I said, this is
Hey, how are you? Come on in. Sorry to keep you guys waiting.
No worries.
Yeah.
Thank you for waiting. Sorry we kept you. Sit anywhere you like. Our recording secretary is absent, so you're more than welcome to sit there if you like.
recording though.
Nope.
No,
No, we have 2 recorders
we have two,
going.
we're double recording.
Yeah.
In case the first one breaks, we gotta have a
It's a
backup.
different product. And when the
How are
other
you?
town-
One for everyone.
All right.
It'll be nice and
They're like-
quick for you guys.
All right. All right. So Dan Kelly, welcome. We're going to go around the board and introduce. We do have a new member. So go ahead, Ralph.
Ralph Mitchell,
Mike Warner?
John, no.
And a couple that way, Dan.
Yeah, we left off with John Noon.
Kathleen?
Need
or
one more
Tina?
if we have one.
Where's
Yep,
my
absolutely.
copy?
Hi.
Val Caffrey.
Chuck Colby.
And Rick Anderson?
Sally.
Dan Kelly, Health Agent.
Danielle Clancy, Chair of the Board of Health.
Danielle, thank you for coming as well. Okay, so just for the record, we have the Board of Health. They are Department 24. If you're keeping track with the Article 2, and they are
Page 6.
page 6 of 9. And starting with line 120, Rosemary, can we just get one conversation going, please?
I'm just showing the numbers.
Okay, so Dan, we'll let you make your presentation, then we'll open it up to the board for questions.
Absolutely. I'll be pretty quick for you guys. So basically, only 4 changes on here. Not that there's a ton of lines, so it almost hits half of them. But so the first 2 I'll get into are the 2 salary lines. One, obviously, contractual with Dina, the clerk, and then mine. I have in there 2.5%. I've spoken with Mary Beth. I don't know if anything's changed since then. I haven't got to actually have my full budget meeting with her yet, but I'm pretty sure that's what she's recommending. It's also what my board agreed with and voted on. One of the things you'll see on there is recording secretary for $900. We are moving to night meetings. I don't know if you're all aware, but we've been meeting during the day, which Dina has basically performed the duty as the recording secretary. But now that we're being, I don't want to say forced to go to nights, but because of obligations from board members, we got to move to nights. So that's just budgeted in there for 3 hours a meeting for 12 meetings throughout the year at that rate of $25 that the selectmen voted on a couple years ago. Where I think they went by tiers, and we're considered a tier 2 board as far as the recording secretary goes. So that's the reason for that increase. And then the last increase on there is the expense line. We've been hoping to do this for a couple of years. I know we've had some bigger numbers in the past, so we haven't been able to really touch on this. For me, the biggest things with the expense line is we would hope to be able to do a little bit more community outreach, things like Narcan trainings. Another big thing we've seen an increase in over the last couple of years because of board members like Danielle paying out of pocket for advertising. We've seen increases in all of our events, especially our Sharps event, where the detectives that ran the event over in Middleborough, collected from each Plymouth County community that collected that day, said we took in 5 times more Sharps than anyone else. So basically, the Board of Health tries to run it on the same day that the police do drug take back, just to get a 2-in-1. So they do drug take back, we do Sharps take back. I've seen 31-gallon jugs of water filled with diabetes Sharps for cats come in one day, and it's fairly expensive, which that comes out of our expense line, the ability to collect that, because we got to pay for boxes and bags and disposal. We haven't gone over yet. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe next year I would come in here with a 200, well, I wouldn't come in here, but I'd end up with a, say, $100 to $300 deficit, because we just have been collecting so much and just the cost of everything's gone up. This year we're
Twice a year, the Sharps.
Yep.
The Sharps.
Yeah, this year we're locked into the same rate we have been, but next year I'm sure it's going to go up because it's a contract every 2 years, and last year it only went up $1.27. However, I would expect it to be a similar type of raise, but it's going to just continue to go up and up. I mean, that's everything. I know you guys are aware of that. And if you have any questions, I'm
I do.
more than...
So I thought the Sharps were.
Okay, we'll start with you.
Yeah.
You have a choice.
You don't have a choice. I thought, no.
Yep.
My assumption was the Sharps were for, and I have medications
Yep.
that I have to inject. So, but I'm able to go and dispose of them,
At the police station.
not at the police station.
Yeah, where do you bring them, like Duval's or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can do that. Obviously, we could advertise for residents to bring them all there, and we could get rid of our box and not offer
No,
it.
no. You could do the box. I thought the box was for Oh, they do it for non-medical things? I do it for, I get my medical
Yeah,
stuff.
there's a box over there that takes drugs and one that takes sharps.
So at the police station, we have,
Mine is like,
there are two boxes. One takes sharps and one takes drugs. That is there all year. We pay for the sharps one all year. We have pickup every month. Twice a year we advertise the heck out of this. Sharps and drugs pickup. It's a drive-through event at the police station. People don't have to get out of their car. They hand us their sharps, their drugs. We take them. A lot of the money I am paying out of pocket for all the advertising for this.
I tell her she should stop so we wouldn't be so busy.
It's the only way. And if we
Somebody
don't
lives.
advertise it, nobody's coming. And that's
And
the
I've
way
seen the
I mean,
advertisements.
with kids and medication,
That's how I feel. We take the EpiPens, they're very hard to get rid of. We will take anything. I take all the hospice supplies people have. They bring us everything. And basically we sort through it. We throw out the stuff we can throw out. We get rid of the sharps. You know, we take the stuff people don't know what to do
so
with.
the EpiPens can't go, that was what I was saying, because mine's an EpiPen.
Correct.
So that goes to the pharmacy, could we,
You could bring it to us
You
on
can
a
bring it
collection
to
day
us
as
on
well.
a drive-through, one
Yeah.
of the 2 drive-through events,
Yeah.
and we would take it. We advertise through the schools, we advertise through Housing Authority, through the Senior Center. Some of the stores in town will put up my posters for me.
Some don't.
So, you know, we do a lot of advertising for that, and we take in a lot of stuff. My big thing is to get this out of people's houses, out of their closets, away from their kids.
It's scary. The woman that came in, for example, with the like probably 30-gallon jug, she had 2 giant trash bags just sitting around the house, which you really shouldn't be doing. Basically, I think this budget, as you guys see, it's a 3.5% increase, which I know we normally try to look at 2.5. But if we weren't adding back a recording secretary that we cut years ago when we went to the day meetings, it'd only be 2.8%. So I think it's pretty close into that realm. And obviously the expense line increases really, we just want to be able to keep providing these services to the townsfolk and hopefully maybe to be able to do a little bit extra as well.
And one of the things we're looking at is we would really, really like to do a combined Narcan AED training at the same time in combination with the fire department, especially get some of the older people in, get the people from the housing authority in, really, you know, focus on the AED and then the Narcan and get this done for the community with the fire department. We would take care of one end of it, the fire department would take care of the other end of it. And, you know, but again, we can't do this without advertising, without money to pay for advertising. We don't want to hold this, we don't want to, you know, pay firefighters overtime, pay our people overtime and have nobody show up. It doesn't, you know, if we don't have the budget to advertise, then there's no point in doing these things. The same with our rabies clinic. We have a drive-through rabies clinic. I don't feel like we're advertising it well enough. I feel like we do a $10 rabies shot for anybody as a drive-through. Our vet does it right in the car. All they have to do is drive up. But again, I feel like we could be getting, we have a good turnout, but I feel like we could have a better turnout if we did more advertising. I do not pay for advertising for that. So
Okay.
it's whatever shows up, shows up.
All right. I just had a question on line 121. So your department request is $38,710.
Yep.
The budget from the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, the town administrator is recommending $40,054. So
I was told that there was no step, which must mean there is a
it must
step.
be a step
Yep.
because she's going an additional amount over the amount you requested. So I know you haven't met with her yet, so
Yeah.
so just be likely to see that line increase because she probably has. She's recommending a 6.06% increase,
Yes.
so that must include a step.
We met probably before I ever even received an email from you, and I checked about the step, and we thought there was no step, obviously. So I meet with her on the 10th, so
Okay.
I'm glad you pointed that out.
Yeah, so at least you go in expecting that, you know, that
Yep.
that will be a different number. And also, she does not have the $900 as a recommendation for the recording secretary either. So that memo must not have gotten there yet either.
She does know about it, but as of pretty recently.
Okay.
It was a recent vote.
And this
at
was
a-
going back 2 or 3 weeks when we had the joint.
Okay,
meeting
yeah,
with the Board of
so it
Selectmen.
was fairly recently. We just found out
Right.
that a board member got a new position at work, won't be able to meet during the day anymore. So that was the reason for the change.
Okay.
I would love to be able to meet during the day, but it's no longer going to be possible.
Right. Mike, did you want to mention?
Line
Oh, sorry.
585 also, that's a big increase.
Line 585 is the,
Expense line.
The expenses, it went, it's,
so you recommend
It's-
4,000, she's got
it's
3,000.
at 3,000.
Yeah, so
That's a,
you're gonna have to sell that one.
Yep.
25% changes.
Yeah.
Need to know why.
$1,000 increase in another department though might be a .025.
Understood.
It's the
No,
size
no,
of the
I
department.
understand, and it's
The demographic changes or demographic need changes,
We have an aging,
even aging demographic.
we have an aging demographic for, we're trying to accommodate
it's one of the
that.
good things about things like the rabies clinic. People on a fixed income can come get a dog, its booster for $10,
$10,
opposed
sure.
to I hear some people spending upwards of $100 very easily for a rabies
whether you
booster.
go
Just
to
just to walk in the vet now is
Yeah.
well over
Well
$100.
over 100, 100
Plus
is a
the,
bargain.
oh yeah.
And
We-
I think
Part of
you're
the-
right on the advertising, because I've done my dog before a couple of years ago, back when they were in the town there.
We'll
But-
advertise on-
But I don't remember seeing it this past
Right.
year, yes.
Yeah.
We'll advertise it on cable access and things like that, but
It'd be nice if we could get the posters out and again, in the businesses and in some of the
Yeah.
other places. But again, it costs money to
Yeah,
put the
yeah,
posters.
that's where the money should go, to
Is it
serve the
done at a certain
demographics.
time?
Concerns the
Is it
current
done?
On a
demographics.
certain
Yeah.
day or something?
We do it,
generally we try to do it in the summer month. It can change depending on vet availability.
lately it's been a Friday in June.
Yeah,
because
Friday
the
in
vet
June
used to
has
come on
been-
Saturday, but now we'll only do Fridays.
Well, I'm wondering, because there's always an article, which is how we know to get our dog re-registered
Yeah.
for another year. If you were to
Yeah, that's
tag
usually
on,
July or August,
that's,
yeah.
hey, it's already something in the newspaper that people are seeing, it's already advertised, you just add another line. And by the way, we're offering a...
And our electronic sign.
We
It was
do-
up
we
there.
do put it on there.
Yeah.
Did you?
We do put it on there.
Yeah.
Basically, anywhere we can get it up there for free, we'll send it to, I think, was it this year that it wasn't posted in the newspaper,
Yes,
even though we
she
spent
is,
it multiple times?
not been so great about putting our stuff in the paper.
Yeah.
We sent our drug and sharp take back 3 times to
She
her.
wouldn't put that
Whitman
in there.
Express.
Really?
She wouldn't put it
The
in.
Express.
Yeah.
But that's typically where I see.
Too many thrilling
Yeah.
stories.
Yeah, right. There's a lot going on here, you know.
Well, there's only about 6 pages in the paper now.
I'm not sure what's going on with that. I'm not
Yeah.
sure why.
Anyways, that'd be great for the sort of demographics, the older people.
Go ahead.
Nobody else had to raise their hand. I want to point that out to you.
I
You know,
raised my hand.
he's
Okay, you're being picked on. Let the record reflect.
Let
Go
the
ahead.
record reflect, and I've already texted him this, so he knows it. Demographics, overall trends since COVID is more people have dogs. This is nationally. We were seeing that same reflection here, more people
So,
having dogs locally.
Since we've done, well, I can't tell you that for sure. However, every year we have had an increase in the amount of people we've served at the rabies clinic. My very first year, we did 30. 2 years ago, about mid-40s, and this past year we did 62. We would love to be able to get more. We'd love to be able to get a weekend from the vet. I'm not sure that's going to happen. There is a new vet working over at Abington Animal Hospital who services us, and last year I did talk to him about doing a Saturday, and it sounded like he was maybe open to it, which I also think would just naturally help increase the number of people we get, of course.
But our advertising, I mean, I think all of this stuff, I think advertising is key.
I don't want to sell this for anybody, but if I were to think about what I pay for a rabies shot at Abington, probably from the same exact person,
Probably.
to the $10 for here, and think about what percentage of the population has a dog, and outreach could actually overall save our citizens significantly more to do it this way. So in terms of, but not everybody has a dog, so that gets kind of
We'll
complicated.
take cats or ferrets as well.
Okay.
I was gonna ask
Now we're
about that.
talking.
Do you take cats?
You added 6%.
We do.
And you know what, you don't have to take them out of your car either, and that's a big deal for
Yeah.
a lot of these animals, is they can stay in the car, the vet does it right there.
I mean, I think we already do a pretty good job too, especially obviously for me, it's never going to be that case. But even like we have people like Dina in the office who volunteers her time. She doesn't get paid to come to the rabies clinic. I think you'd be hard pressed to get someone from some other offices to show up at an event and not get paid for it. Dina does that. Well, yeah, but that's different. But still, I just think it's worth pointing out that I do believe, not speaking about myself, but we have great staff and a great board down there that really does try to do what's best for the community. They have
And the
their
whole
interest
board
at
showed
heart.
up last year for this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we did, yeah.
So, you know, we want to keep being able to program, that's part of our task. And to bring up another thing, at town meeting every year, we get tasked with more and more. Now we're a right to farm.
I remember that, yeah.
You know, the year before maybe,
Plastic
it was
bags.
the paper bag thing.
Right, yeah.
So every year we get more tasks and no more money, and more tasks, and more tasks.
We call those unfunded liabilities.
Yes.
Yeah, we know them all too
Plus
well.
whatever the state dumps on us too.
Right.
That's part of our budgeting when we ask for demographics, changes in laws or regulations.
So this is where the rubber meets the road, is when you meet with the town administrator who comes up with this, preliminary budget. So, I mean, it's marketing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is a service, obviously, that it affects a great many people in the town, so.
I think it'll save the overall population more than $1,000.
Yeah, I think,
It's the justification for it.
and I think the vet bills have gone up way a lot since COVID, and, I think incomes aren't meeting the rise in pet costs and other
I
costs.
think you
Taxes
mentioned demographics. A lot of our seniors have pets for emotional
Yeah.
and social reasons.
And,
Keeps them walking, keeps them.
and I
And
can tell
health
you that
insurance
we
on
are
pets has
serving
gone
some
up
of
too.
the,
governing, well,
should we say,
Blue
I
Cross
don't
is
know if
cheap.
I want to call them mentally ill, but those who are less fortunate, not necessarily seniors, but with this rabies clinic and some of these other
Oh,
programs.
parents too. Parents.
Yeah.
Us less
Okay.
fortunate
And
parents.
that's true. You've been to the vet, these parents pull up with 3 kids in the car and the dogs and all that. They don't have to get out with all this and wait in line and so.
All right. Kathleen, then John.
Just one editorial question. Line 300, should the title be public health nurse?
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
thank you, that's my pet peeve.
Who-
We went through this last
We
year.
asked for this last year.
Yes, and
Yeah,
we've
that's
been
brought up.
We are not a visiting
It's a
nurse, we will not come to
public
your
health
house.
nurse.
We asked for
And
this.
we tried.
did ask for
We've been
this.
trying to get this changed since before that
And
with
I asked
multiple
the town
town
administrator
administrators.
last year. and I
Well, when
said,
you meet with her, make sure you make a note on your page.
Well, it's the one thing that is noted for my meeting with her to make sure I bring up. So
Yeah.
it is her that is going to have to make that
Yeah,
change.
we brought it up last year.
Well, I brought it up with her last year, and obviously the circumstances were different. She came in very
Right,
late
yeah,
to the
yeah.
situation, so she told me to bring it up this year, and hopefully that will be changed.
I was
because-
assured by the previous town administrator that it was changed, and apparently
Right.
not.
It's changed on
There was a lot
what
of
I'm calling the document that we received from the town administrator. If I'm going back on.
Public health nurse is on 300, yep.
Yes, so-
Okay, so she is probably updated
already
and
doing
whatever.
it, yeah.
Yep, good. Nice catch.
Suggestion?
Well, John first, then you can.
Have you figured in, and I have no idea, when the cows are coming home, but Honster is talking about really actively bringing a herd in.
Yes, hopefully.
Your
So
inspection money, is that going to be enough?
yes, that will end up being a very time-consuming thing. Right now, he's actually dealing with, which I get the pleasure of helping him with, a beaver issue on the property that are flooding out his fields, so he doesn't have the ability to farm it properly. So we've been dealing with its conservation committee, myself, DEP, Mass Wildlife, the state of Massachusetts, to figure that out on what to
Could
do
have
with
gone
the
there with my
beavers.
bow and taken care of them.
Beavers are covered.
Yeah, so
Get a little hat.
he is hoping to get his herd there. His herd currently grazes in Middleborough. he pays for them to graze there, and is hoping to get them there as soon as possible. He can't move them until he can get a fence up, though. So.
Okay. Rosemary.
Just a question. So this directly correlates with if you need rabies shot to have your dog license, correct?
Correct.
Usually, when you have any sort of services like a dog tag or anything else, or it reflects the cost. Could we increase the cost of dog license by $1, $2, or whatever to offset the cost?
The
of
problem
shot?
is the clerk licenses the dogs and not us.
Okay.
And the money we take in from the rabies vaccine goes directly to the vet. We take none of it.
Because they volunteer their
$10
time.
goes right to the vet for the cost of the vaccine.
Yeah.
I wonder if there could be some sort of
Collaboration.
or look at this.
We
so
have
that,
told the clerk that she cannot license at these events because we don't want people to feel coerced
into licensing.
We feel
I would
it's more
rather-
important that they
I'm not
get the
talking about the
rabies
licensing
shot.
part. They don't have to
No,
happen at the same
yeah.
time. I'm talking about we get so when I'm thinking about finances, I'm thinking about making sure that people are paying for what they're paying for. So the person who might not have a dog, even though it's just $1,000 or whatever, but this might expand and you might want to do more. Since we have how many dogs do we have?
Yeah.
You can ask the clerk and see how many is
Because
tagged.
we could basically say,
Never mind how many not.
but basically, pay an extra $2 and save an extra $75 on the shot. It's just a thought.
It gets a little complicated with her licensing because it depends if they're neutered, they're not neutered, they're this, they're that.
We don't want to saddle another department with any more.
No,
And you have a
there's
kennel license. It depends what kind of kennel. Like I have a hobby kennel license, so that's a different
It's like
license.
$10 more, if you don't. have
Right. So I get 10 tag. It gets a little. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Um,
Only because you could probably end up working with just 1,000
mhm.
or more.
Okay, good point. John, then Kathleen.
I was only going to suggest that you bring it up to Dawn Varley
I will.
when the clerk's budget comes up
Exactly.
Like
and
it,
see
but I
how
will.
it goes.
Good point.
She's going to tell you
Kathleen?
we told her she couldn't.
I know.
I just want to know, do you submit an annual report to be published in the town daily?
Yes, we did.
Could you include, just a suggestion, the narrative about what it takes to get Hornstra Farms cows here? Because I read the annual reports, and I think people in town should know. We're thrilled. I don't think there's anyone in town who isn't happy that Peaceful Meadows is now on Hornstra Farms. But there's always a cost, behind the curtain that people in town don't appreciate. So I think if you include that, how you helped Mr. Hornstra get his cows here. would
Sounds
be
like a
great
kid's
narrative.
book.
Cows are coming home.
And no one's happier than me that
Maybe they
Hornstra's
freaking-
replaced Peaceful Meadows there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good. All right, any other questions for our Board of Health Department? Thank you.
Thank you for your work.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you
If
all.
anything comes up following your meeting with the town administrator, we certainly open the line of communication, and get an email out, and we'll respond with anything that we have.
Absolutely
We
perfect.
appreciate it. You
That's great.
advocate for us.
We do, for sure.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Good work.
If you need any COVID tests, we have them.
All right. Okay, so that exhausts our budget meetings for tonight. We do have a few other things on the agenda. So subcommittee reports, capital committee, anything, Kathleen?
We meet in a week. I've asked Dawn to please send me a copy of the capital requests that he had compiled way before Christmas, but I haven't received it yet.
Okay, and then the regional agreement amendment committee.
We meet next Monday, and the main topic will be the transportation assessment.
Okay. And school building committee.
We meet next Tuesday, and the main topic will be to sign contracts with the OPM and the architect. We had a subcommittee meeting, and I believe that all of the concerns have been addressed.
Okay. Any questions from anyone for Kathleen on any of those subcommittees? The Public Works Department Building Committee has not met. We're still awaiting the special legislation. Still no news on that. We are as well scheduling a meeting with the general contractor just to get a timeline, but I haven't heard anything on how that is progressing either. No communications to the full committee, so just so you know. I'll probably have something by next week, now that we're past the holiday season. The audit, that's something ongoing. I'll pass on the information that we wanted from last meeting was to, I just want to make sure I follow up on this, that we want to request that the salary include the administrative people, right? That was, yep, okay. And fiscal 25 budget. So fiscal 25 budget, Kathleen forwarded our meeting request for them for the next to last week of budget meetings, which I believe is on February 6th.
Superintendent.
Yep, so that will be February 6th, and then on February 13th, there are three: Conservation Commission, Planning Board, and Historical Commission. Perhaps we could reach out to them with the, if they want to come. I mean, those are historically boards that don't come before the Finance Committee, but if any of those boards, that is February 13th's meeting: Conservation Commission, Planning Board, and Historical Commission. So, Ralph, I believe you are the liaison to all three of those?
Is it February 16th, right?
That's a February 13th meeting, it's Tuesday. So if you want to reach out, if they want to come, they certainly can.
Okay.
On January 13th, I'll send them all an email to gauge their interest as well. But I don't want to seem like we're mandating that they come, because these are committees that don't typically come before the Finance Committee with their, budgets.
Yeah.
Do we have the cable?
So here, yeah, I got an update on the cable too. That's part of the agenda item. The emails from both Animal Control and the Cable Director. I'll get to that when I get to that other information. So they've been notified. Cable access for January 23rd. They did send an email to say, and I could read the email. I think I forwarded it to everybody.
Yeah, that made sense though. It made
Yeah.
sense, and it made me wonder why we hadn't in the past ever, because they aren't a department technically.
Right, they're a non-profit 501c3, so do they necessarily, but it's like any other,
They get
budget.
money every year.
It would be nice if they just gave a little report about,
What's going on?
what their budget does.
But the town administrator should, and this is where I came up with I think earlier, my question is, they are paying rent for the building or not paying rent, or they're utilizing a town building, so it gets, we have to incorporate how much are we donating in our available resources, and, that has to be spoken about for that particular building, because it is a facility that handles two towns, Whitman and Hanson. It's the same thing. If we're paying our share, which is a percentage of our cable usage, I believe, and then we're also giving a free building. There's, you know what I mean? That I'd like to. That's a town administrative question more than.
Yep. Okay.
Is there rent being paid?
So that individual, the director of the Whitman Cable Access, Whitman Hanson Cable Access, will get back to us with a determination when he meets with Mary Beth, I guess, whether or not.
I could get it from Mary Beth.
Yeah.
Other than that, she's right.
Yeah. So it'd certainly be up to him. And then the communication to the Animal Control, who's also scheduled for January 23rd. In her email response, I'll read it to you just so you have an idea of why she's not coming. And it starts out, I feel like it's been years, nothing has changed. I'm not a department head. And in my opinion, we do not even have a department. I cannot do anything on it as selectman yet. Since last winter, spring, we have discussed going into the 3-town deal, which I believe is now a 2-town deal, and Mary Beth is supposedly working on that. and the reason that Dina from the Board of Health stopped looking into grants for the rehab shelter. I am truly not sure how to communicate. Joe and I do everything ourselves, mostly our resources and contacts. She goes on a little bit about what the vet does. So sadly, I can keep the day and time, and Joe and I can come, just not exactly sure what I can say about this department or budget. So apparently just Joe is coming to the meeting, and Mary Beth will present the budget information, because she doesn't feel, in my mind, from the communication, that she's a budget manager
Hold on
for
a
the
second.
department.
There's a way to determine this. Who's signing off the bills for those departments? We have money that's allocated to this department. So last time I looked, because she did come in and she said she was not a department head, wasn't. I went and I pulled the file. And it was not her. She was not the person. It was Lincoln. Okay, Lincoln's no longer here. Who has been signing for those? And that person needs to come in and represent that budget.
So I think that will be the town administrator, Mary Beth. So that's what she said in the bottom line for her email. So
That's who we sent it to.
Animal control has bounced around from Board of Health to, I think, at one point,
Police,
police
it was
department
police.
and town administrator.
well, they were the police before they were the Board of Health.
Well, wait a minute,
Yeah,
they're in
it was,
police
yeah.
departments. And
Most of the towns are at the
just
police
want to make
department.
a footnote here. When they were at the police, they were moved out of the police, but their budget, the amount was not shifted down. The same amount was still at the police station. So the police department grew into that part of the budget. And then we moved it over to the Board of Health, and then it moved out to the Board of Health, and the Board of Health maintained that budget. So it was utilized, the shifts were utilized to grow those departments. And I think people needed to recognize that. I think I said.
So if a department wants to supplement their budget, they should take on the
For
animal
1 year, you
control
take on animal control,
to supplement their budget.
and then
Yeah.
you keep the amounts, and then it shifts to someone else. Take on the animal control department, and then
Chuck,
shift
send
it
a
over
note to
to
Tom Hickey.
That's awful, but I mean, it just hasn't been handled.
Yes, so hopefully we can get some information from the town administrator on that budget. But like I said, all of the communications have gone out to each department, so they are all aware of when they are. And then Capital Committee is scheduled for March 5th, as we mentioned earlier. So that's it for the budget calendar.
Just insert, I don't know where to insert it, because the full committee wasn't here when I mentioned that. The December 20th school committee meeting was changed from a budget presentation to an executive session. During that executive session, the business administrator, John Stanbrook, announced that he was resigning at the end of this calendar year, this fiscal year, rather, June 30th. So there is no budget. I usually have some preliminary information to share with the committee since it's the biggest budget on our table, but there's no information. The next meeting of the school committee is next Wednesday, the 10th, and then the following Wednesday, the 17th, is also a budget meeting. So I don't have anything about the budget because there's nothing available.
Okay. And I'm sure we'll probably get some information before February 20th, or before February 6th, when they're scheduled to come in to present. All right, anybody else have anything on the budget they want to bring up? Okay, then we move on to our final old business item, which is the annual report. I did spend some time on this. This is just a draft, I want to stress. So your homework is just to take it home and start redlining things that you want to see changed, or punctuation, grammatics, anything. Like I said, it's...
Can you send me an electronic copy?
I could send an electronic. The only problem that's why I don't send an electronic copy. I like to do it in-house so the draft doesn't get out there. But I left the original copy on the printer downstairs. That was that phone call, so I guess it's out anyway. So I can email it if it's easier for you to make changes. Sure. Yep. I'll write that down. All right. Anybody? So communications. We have one communication, and it's a hand-delivered Christmas card from the town administrator and the assistant town administrator and the administrative assistant for selectmen. So hang that on our bulletin board, I guess.
Was it ticking?
And nope, no ticking sounds. Upcoming meetings, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 meetings left to get us through our budget meetings. And then obviously we'll start deliberating on the draft warrant. And, if we get timely information from the Whitman-Hanson Regional School District, we won't be meeting twice a week in April like we did last year. We don't want to do that again.
I believe the superintendent has committed, sorry, Rosemary, to the 5%, because Mary Beth and Lisa Green have met with Jeff twice, and both have said each town can only handle 5%, and I believe he has said, I wasn't there, so I don't believe we're going to see any.
Well, it is up to the school committee, so I mean,
understand that.
so it's almost like negotiating out of
This is
collective
it. This
bargaining.
is where this one has to come in, because we look at that point, now, I think it was almost 5% last year, so that percentage from the state is going to 1.6. How can he commit if the aid's gonna come in probably at a different rate?
I don't know.
If you look at, I was just looking at the numbers, remember that we're paying off the high school. So you're losing 4-point-something% of the
Oh, that's
budget
not-
is down.
That's gonna go to a debt, those are two different budgets.
But in the budget, it's showing, so when you do the math, it says it's a minus 4% for that, and it's a 5% for the rest of the operating budget.
Okay, so the debt
But it's
schedule,
there's a little funny math, yeah.
okay, I'm gonna have to
I'll show
look
you.
at that again.
It's-
Yeah,
yeah.
show me that, because I'm not visualizing that. I usually visualize those as two different budgets, debt schedules and same.
Yeah, the debt schedule for the high school is not within the levy.
It's not, it's actually, it shouldn't be within their
Debt
budget.
service.
It's like technically part of their budget. Because of the capital.
Oh, yeah, well, it is a
Shouldn't be
line
part of
item.
the fact- it should be
It's a
part-
line item on Article 2, right?
But
Is
it
that?
shouldn't be part of the fact, that's what I'm saying. Oh, I see what you're saying.
All right, well, we'll take a look at that, and then maybe we can give the committee some more information about it.
But that creative financing might just offset them to be able to, you're correct. And that's kind of where I'm like, we really have to be careful, because generally this is, in most towns, it's about, I think the average is about 60% of the budget. A school, that's why you start with.
Interesting.
It used to be 50, it's gone up even more.
Okay, anybody else have anything they want to bring up on new business, old business? So the other information there, the conflict of interest, please do your homework, and then the other thing for the, for the conflict of interest, for the annual report, just send me, just write down your edits, and when we get together next week, we'll draft up a final copy.
You'll send me the link of what I'm
You said it right to me.
Yep, I'll send it by email to everyone.
Good catch.
I haven't had an email from you in a while, though.
You haven't?
Yeah, I re-forwarded it to,
I got you sent me
yeah, so
this.
that's got the link.
Yeah, I saw that. I actually screwed up on the
Yeah.
phone.
Oh, for the conflict of interest, you already get it out to everyone? Great,
Yeah,
thank you.
got it. Thanks.
Excellent.
Well, if you were on the list, because it was only people that owed something was on
Yeah.
the list. So I
How long
think
was the
you're up
test?
to date,
How
right?
long was
Yeah,
the test, John?
yeah. I'm still gonna do it anyway, because
didn't.
it's new.
Well, I mean, I took it at one
It's
point.
updated.
Yeah.
It's an hour, because you
An
gotta
hour,
sit through the whole,
Yeah.
the training.
I don't have to do the training, though, right? You said that, right?
But I think that's how you get to the test.
Yeah, in order to take the test, you almost should breeze through that, because, I mean, you can get all the answers wrong and still pass. I always feel guilty when I get one wrong. How many times I've taken that test? All right, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you all for coming. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Chuck, thank you for taking the minutes.